I just want to give a really big shout out to humans, whoever came up with the idea of running hot water through coffee beans and then drinking that like weird dirty water. That was an absolute stroke of genius. Mad props to whoever came up with that. But anyways, all jokes aside, coffee's amazing. Okay, there, I said it. Let's get straight into today's video because I've actually been wanting to talk about this for like a decent stretch of time, but I was actually on Big Bad Toy Store the other day and I just happened to swipe across a new little section that they had where they were essentially advertising not only some clearance deals for their Marvel Select, or I should say Diamond Select collectibles, but also I guess there's a restock that just happened for small online retailers. I'm not sure if this applies to Amazon or any of the other big retailers that carry Diamond, but here's the thing, and for those of you guys that don't know, Diamond Select is no more. Like, they decided to completely cancel their collectible branch. I think a lot of it had to do with just the way that the business was being handled, and eventually I think the tariffs is kind of just the cherry on top, the caveat, if you will. At the end of the day, it's no longer going to be there. Now, the real question here is how they're going to decide to end production for these collectibles. Are they going to continue for a decent stretch of time because there were a lot of action figures and statues that were on pre-order? Are they going to fulfill as many orders as they possibly can before completely just going out of business? Or are they going to just let it trickle? Are they going to allow some collectibles to go here and there, but then they're just going to stop production? Or they could eventually just decide to stop production altogether, like at the moment that they decided to end the toy line, and just ship out whatever is in the warehouse, whatever they have overseas that was already being manufactured. Maybe they're just going to ship that overseas and then get rid of it. We just don't know exactly how things are going to work, but we do know that they just gave some of these online retailers a little bit of a restock, which I'm assuming could be the last few waves that we received that has to do with Diamond Select, whether they're statues, whether they're little diorama pieces, or the Diamond Select action figures. That's really the question here. But I just wanted to go through some of this because they have some absolute killer deals going on right now. As I mentioned, they do have some stuff that is up for pre-order. Or I shouldn't say up for pre-order. They're restocks that just happened. And so that's really what I wanted to go through because I've said this before and I'll say it again, especially if you're at least a decent fan of the collectibles. I think now is a perfect opportunity to pick these up because we might not see them around for too long. And once stuff sells out, you're not going to have a second opportunity at these, or you will through like third-party vendors, but usually there's going to be a little bit of a markup. So I'm predicting it right now. Or I wouldn't say I'm predicting it, but this is just my assumption that for the next few months, you could start to see a lot of these sell out and just gain an insane amount of value because Diamond is not going to be around. And this is now the perfect opportunity to catch up on anything that you might have missed, or if you were waiting for anything to hit clearance, or if you were just too busy collecting other lines, but you like Diamond Select or Marvel Select, now is the prime opportunity to do so. Now, I thought that we would go through some of these. And by the way, this is coming from somebody that isn't like the biggest Diamond fan. I do have, I think, like maybe 3 or 4 of their statues. I love the statues. They're designed incredibly well. They're put well. They're put together extremely well. A ton of design, a ton of sculpted detail. I really like them. In terms of their select figures, I'm not a huge fan of them per se. I do have a few of them, but they're just like very limited in articulation. No butterfly joints. Their mid-torso articulation is absolutely horrendous. It's funny that people complain about McFarlane and his articulation scheme, but McFarlane is like leagues ahead of Select when it comes down to articulation. I'm not sure what's going on there. But regardless, I thought that we would take a look at some of these. I will say they have a ton of these, like, I guess they're animated or cartoon versions of Marvel characters or like little statues. And I did notice that Big Bad Toy Store had a ton of these on sale. There was like a Doctor Strange. There was a Hulk. I believe there was a Captain America, maybe a few others in there. And they look absolutely phenomenal. If you want something that's cute, something that's small, that has a ton of sculpted detail and just really good paint apps, I think that's really what you would be looking at. And they're readily available and actually somewhat affordable. $35 I think is not too bad. Now, I'm only going off of the promotional images. I'm not sure how these scale next to other statues or other collectibles, but I think these are originally were retailing for $59.99, so $34.99. That's actually quite a bit of a markdown. As I said, now is the perfect opportunity to pick these up. These are some that I'm actually going to add to my wish list. I'm going to keep an eye on them, but they just look really cool. It's kind of like a different take on the Marvel universe, I guess. I'm not sure, as I said, I'm not sure what they're based on. I'm sure there's some sort of animated series back in the day that I haven't watched, but they're cool. It's kind of like putting Marvel characters through like a really cool children's cartoon filter. I personally think that these look absolutely brilliant. And then if you're looking for the actual Marvel Select action figures, you do have, for example, the Super Scroll, which is going for about $20, which is, you know, absolutely, it's an absolutely killer deal, because I think the original retail price point was $29.99. And I have seen a lot of people actually integrate this Super Scroll into their Marvel Legends display, just because some of the versions or some of the panels featuring the Super Scroll sometimes made them a little bit bigger. So I think it definitely fits into a Marvel Legends display if you just want, you know, a big giant Super Scroll in there, or if you want to mix them into your Marvel Legends Super Scroll, a little kind of army, I think he could fit in there perfectly. Then you have, for example, the Gamerverse PlayStation 4 Spider-Man as well. This one is not on sale. I think this one is just a straight up restock, but it looks phenomenal. And I think the paint apps and the sculpt overall was really well designed. As I said, I'm more of an articulation type of guy. I want to get my figures into dynamic poses, so this really doesn't fit into my display. But I know this one got actually a decent, like very good reviews overall. If you're not really into like big articulation, if you just want them standing upright or in just a, you know, a semi decent pose, this is a great figure to pick up. As I said, I've heard great things about the sculpt and the design and the paint job as well. There's an Endgame Hulk, for example, as well, with the Infinity Gauntlet, if I'm not mistaken. That one also originally retailed for $29.99. You can pick it up for $26.99. Same thing if you want to display him with your Marvel Legends display. Because he's Hulk, he's usually a little bit taller than everybody. I think this one fits in perfectly. I did own the original release of this without the Infinity Gauntlet, and I have to say, it was a pretty decent figure. It was Hulk. He's not going to get into crazy poses, and so I think it definitely fits in. I actually like the head sculpt. I like the design work all over the body. So this is definitely one to keep an eye on. You have the original Marvel Select Sabretooth. This is mostly just for collectability. I think it's not a very good figure. It's really old. It's outdated. But this is probably another one of those that was just like a restock, because Marvel Select rarely let their collectibles go out of stock. Like, even if it did go out of stock within a few months, they would just, you know, ship out a ton of these to different multiple retailers. And so I think that's probably what's happening. But keep in mind, this is the last, it could potentially be one of the last restocks from Diamond Select. There's also that Blade Diamond Select action figure, which, again, I've heard great things about, mostly from just people that dabble with collectibles. I've never heard, like, Marvel Legends collectors compare this to anything that's Marvel Legends related, because, again, the articulation isn't there. But in terms of like just the design work, I've heard great things. And I think this is the one that came with a plethora of different accessories, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to assume same thing as with the Sabretooth. This is just a restock of the figure, and there's no clearance or no sale attached to it. But it's a really cool, well-designed figure, and I have seen a lot of people actually displaying this in box. That's another big thing to keep in mind, to emphasize. Marvel Select had some really big, hunky packages that you could hang on your wall and looked really good. I wouldn't necessarily compare it to the Marvel Legends, because I think their packaging is more about functionality. It's more about being compact and saving as much money as they can and space. Whereas in, you know, Select really didn't care. It was about just having the figure floating in their you know, plastic bubble inside of their packaging. I really like their packaging. Overall, I think they're going to display incredibly well, even if you want them just like hanging on a wall somewhere. And then if you want a Tom Holland action figure in your display, not as Spider-Man, but as Nathan Drake from Uncharted, the live action film, you guys can also pick that up. That one is actually on sale. I think it's retailing for about like $17.50, so quite a bit of a hefty discount if you guys are interested, if you guys are a fan of the universe, or as I said, if you just want a really good cheap collectible that could potentially gain value in the foreseeable future, that's another great opportunity there for you. And then I know the Walking Dead universe is essentially dead. Nobody's really paying attention to it. All of the big series, whether it was The Walking Dead or what was it, The Living Ones, and all these other offshoots, they're essentially wrapped up. And if there is one that's still alive, nobody's really paying attention to it. But if you guys want to go back and actually pick up a Rick Grimes action figure, you guys can now do that. I think it's under retail, if I'm not mistaken, or unless the retail originally was $27.99, but you guys can now pick up that particular figure. And just keep in mind, there are not a lot of Walking Dead collectibles. I think there was another McFarlane line, but that one was much smaller. It was better. I think it was like better paint apps, better sculpt work, and then more accessories. But it was closer to like that 5-inch line. People really don't like that line. It's a little bit too small. People don't like to display it. And so if you're interested in something a little bit bigger, closer to like the 1/12 to 1/10 scale, this is the perfect opportunity here. There's also a Marvel Select Iron Man figure, which definitely looks very dated. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's a really, really old wave. There's a Marvel Select Captain Marvel as well that is also on sale. I think it's like 50% off. So just killer deals. And I did mention earlier, they have a ton of these like 1/6 to 1/7 scale busts. I'm personally not a huge fan of the bust. I would rather have like the entire statue, but if you guys are interested in something like that, they do have like a great looking Jean Grey. They have a Chewie from A New Hope. They have a killer looking Doc Ock from the animated series. They have a full statue from Boba Fett. They have a Rey. And if you guys are looking for something a little bit more modern, they have a ton of different either busts or like full statues of the Mandalorian, Grogu. They have some killer statues based on stormtroopers, some of the clones, Ahsoka, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into every single collectible available on Big Bad Toy Store, but now, as I said, now is a perfect opportunity to do so because they just may not be available for a long period of time. I think this could potentially be one of the last few, like restocks and one of the last few waves. It's worth mentioning that they did have a bunch of different collectibles on, like for pre-order. They had like a new War Machine. They had, a crazy amount of, there was supposed to be like a restock of new Captain Americas, that new Captain America Marvel Select action figure, and the list goes on and on. So I'm not sure if they're going to fulfill those or if they're going to cancel them. Only time will tell. But I have a very strong feeling that once these sell out and it starts to become more difficult to actually purchase these, I could see these on eBay, for double, triple, even quadruple what they were originally retailing for. That's just the name of the game. I'm just giving you guys a heads up. I think that's just the way that the collectible community operates. We see this a lot, for example, with HasLabs. Sometimes people will literally just buy HasLabs to wait until they become a little bit more scarce, or wait until new collectors jump in, and then they sell whatever they had available or whatever amount that they bought. Or there may be other people that buy doubles, like, an extra one just to sell later down the road, and then like kind of compensate for the amount that they purchased or the amount that they spent on the original HasLab figure that they purchased, So it's just a matter of learning when to pick these collectibles up. If you are interested in anything that's Diamond Select related, whether that's, statues, action figures, whether it's anything like The Walking Dead, Marvel, so on and so forth, do it now. Like, go hit, Big Bad Toy Store Entertainment Earth. You don't have to go through the websites that I'm telling you. If you guys want to check out Amazon, all that good stuff, do so now, because I think you're going to definitely regret it later when, stuff starts to really become even more scarce. But that's just my personal opinion, my personal take. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. We've been uploading at least one video on a daily basis for the last few months. I'm definitely enjoying it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it just as much. Stay safe out there. Keep up to date with the channel. Like I said, if you want to subscribe or if you want to turn on notifications, you guys can always do that. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the hobby. Pose your action figures. Play around with them. Photograph them. Whatever it is that makes you happy about collecting, do that, because that's the most important part of all this. Stay safe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.